The house that I currently live in has an attic, and I have lived in this house for the past 8 years, since I was 13 years old. One night during a bad winter where it was constantly raining and had strong winds, I heard boxes being moved in the attic. I freaked out and lay awake the whole night, listening to these weird sounds coming from the attic. In the morning, I confronted my parents, asking if it was them. They both denied it and have no reason to go up there. They only go in around Christmas time because that's where we store the tree, Christmas decorations, and stuff we don't use but don't want to throw away. I told them I heard noises, and they both brushed me off and claimed I was just hearing things. The next night, I heard the sounds again, and the next night, and the night after. For the whole week, I told my friends at school, and they said somebody must be in my attic. I told them that it was impossible. The only way in my attic is by grabbing the ladder from the shed in the garden, coming into the house, and next to the laundry, which is next to my room. There's a hole, like a proper hole. Sorry, I don't know how to describe it, with a panel covering it, and that's how you get in the attic. After that week, when the weather cleared up and I didn't hear any more noises coming from the attic, I simply forgot about it until I forgot my key one day. Called my dad, who was at work, and asked him if there was a spare key hidden somewhere I could use to get in. He told me there was a way of getting into the attic via the roof. He told me about a large panel on the roof that could be removed and you could get into the attic. It is also quite easy to get on the roof, and my younger brother has done it many times with ease, to rescue our cat or balls that ended up there. My blood went cold. Somebody could have gotten to the attic. Someone could have been in our attic for a week, and then a dark thought crossed my mind. What if he was still there? I noped out hard and walked around the neighborhood for 3 hours instead while waiting for my dad to come home. When he did, I told him again about that week I heard noises in the attic and how we could have gotten in. But again, he brushed me off. The next few years were filled with the occasional horror moment. I have 2 glass doors in my room that face the backyard, and we have lights on motion sensors in the garden. One night while I was sleeping, my dog was asleep next to me and my back to the glass doors. My room was suddenly flooded with light. Someone or something was in the garden. I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just a stray cat, I thought. Then is when my dog started growling. He's a very sweet dog and timid. They're kitten bullies, and I froze. I had never heard him growl before, and that's when I heard a tapping on the glass door. I wanted to cry. I was terrified that if whoever was tapping on the glass wanted in, the glass wasn't going to stop him. Tapping continued for a few more minutes. I lay still, pretending to be asleep. Then I heard the doorknob being tested, and then my dog started barking, really deep and menacing-like. Whoever was there fled. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, scared that he was going to come back. In the morning, my dad yelled at me due to the dog barking waking him up. I cried and told him about what happened. Once again, he brushed me off. Another time when we changed the locks because my brother had lost his wallet with his keys in it, and their address was in his wallet. It later was found in our mom's house. My dad gave me my new key for the front door, put it on my bed, and went shopping with my dad and brother. When I came back, it was gone. I searched everywhere. Never turned up. I ended up taking the spare key my dad had hidden in the garden and pretending it was my main. He would later put another key in the garden, which was hidden under my dog's bed. This is important for later. Other things have happened, but I think I have given enough backstory. This was about 2 months ago. My dad travels for work sometimes. When he does, my brother says he and our mom look after the house and the animals. My dad had been gone for about 5 days when this happened. I had left the main computer on, and it was just on my Google homepage. I went to bed and woke up 2 hours later. My stomach was killing me. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up. I had made it a bit of a mess, so I went to the kitchen. I have an open plan kitchen, so it also has a dining room and a small living room in this big room. The main computer is also in this room. To grab a mop and bucket. That's when I saw the computer screen on. Not dark like when you don't touch your computer for a while and the screen goes black. Curious, I went over to look at it and saw it was on YouTube, on a random music search page, with the music typed into the search bar. And I was freaked out, like, what the heck? I clicked back and it went on a few different music things before going on a website of a university my brother was considering going to, and I had taken him to the open day only a few weeks ago. Then I clicked back again, and it went on my email. I leave it logged in, and then it went to my university homepage. I was beyond freaked out. All I could think was somebody was in my house, and they had used my computer and gone searching for all this stuff. But why? I quickly grabbed a knife and headed to the main living room, which is next to the front door. called my best friend who lived a 30-minute drive away, and she told me she was coming to pick me up. I searched the living room while on the phone with her, and I told her if I screamed to call the police. After making sure the living room was safe, I paced, waiting for her. My cats were freaked out and were hiding, something they never do. When she arrived, we searched my house. I violently kicked doors open and yelled that if somebody was in the house, I would stab them. There was no one inside the house. I was still freaked out, and my best friend told me I was spending the night with her at her house. I felt bad leaving my animals, but I couldn't bring them due to her having dogs that didn't like cats and could be aggressive with my dog at times. As we were leaving, a thought hit me. What if the person was in the attic? My best friend told me no way we were searching the attic and grabbed me. I didn't call the police, and my dad arrived home the next day. I told him what had happened last night, and he had laughed at me and once again brushed me off. I do believe there is, or at least was, someone living in my attic. I'm very scared to be left home alone overnight, and I'll update if anything else happens, and I do plan on moving out next year. This happened around 2018. For context, a buddy of mine, we'll call him KG, used to be our group's ladies' man, and it wasn't uncommon for him to want to go meet up with somebody during the night. This night in particular was no different. Some girl had messaged him on a dating app inviting him to come hang out. He said he was with a friend, but we'd be free in a few hours. He said no problem, just bring him with you. We can all smoke and just hang out. I was fine with it, and she gave KG the address. The place was an apartment about an hour away. We got in the truck and headed over. The drive was about 30 minutes down the highway, followed by 45 minutes of nothing but gravel roads and fields. I distinctly remembered we joked about how it felt like we were in an alternate dimension. Zero light, no houses, and don't remember seeing a speed limit or a stop sign for most of the drive. Once we arrived, it was extremely ominous. A single yellow light hung over a single apartment building that probably only had about 3 units. The place looked old and borderline abandoned. The girl, who I'll call M, was standing out there waiting for us. I couldn't make out any features, as all I saw from the car was a silhouette. We got out, and she let us inside. KG seemed uncomfortable when he saw her, but was playing it off. I noticed she was considerably older than us, and was not the type KG would normally go for. To be entirely honest, she looked cracked out. Her face was covered in the marks you see when stimulant users pick their faces. Regardless, we got in her apartment and shit was off immediately. The place was bare. A single couch lined with plastic and a TV sat in the living room. And the kitchen cabinets were all empty, and many were just open. For some reason, I also remember Bob's Burgers playing at a crazy loud volume on the TV. She had a couple of blunts already rolled up, and I got to breaking down our share to roll. She offered us to drink some wine and said it was all that she had. She poured 3 glasses, and I knocked back about half of it before almost gagging at a chemical taste. I didn't say anything. I don't really like wine as is, and only accepted it because I was thirsty, and she said her tap water wasn't safe to drink. I figured it was just really cheap and didn't want to be rude. KG drank his, and we got to smoking and talking. Once she got to go to the bathroom, KG whispered to me that he got catfished and showed me the profile with obviously different girls' photos. I asked if we should go, and he said she was probably just insecure, and that he still wants to hang out and see where things go. She got back and insisted on another blunt. Specifically the one she rolled. We kept talking, and I noticed she seemed to be getting antsy and shorter in her responses. She kept being very flirtatious with the both of us as well, saying we'd be a lot more comfy if we went in her room. I also noticed I was beginning to feel strange. Not the fun strangeness of THC, but the ominous feeling that I was losing control of my muscles and having a hard time thinking or talking. KG was basically melted in the couch, but still carrying on talking to her. I looked in my glass and noticed powdery gunk collecting at the top. I felt sick and stumbled to the bathroom. The bathroom was disgusting. I sat down on the side of the tub and tried to figure out what the heck was happening. I was convinced we'd been drugged, but kept telling myself I was just greening out and being paranoid, despite that not being normal for me. I eventually lost track of time and place in there, but luckily I was smart enough to lock the door. At some point, I walked out to see the living room empty and heard groaning in the other room. I knocked on the door and got no answer. I blacked out on the couch again and only came to after hearing shuffling and seeing KG bust out of the room half naked and M following him. I stood up and she looked stone-faced. KG didn't say anything and stumbled fast out the door. I didn't need to be convinced and followed quickly. The entire walk back to the car, she followed us, not running or yelling, just walking with us, seemingly waiting for us to fall. Somehow in his drugged up state, KG got the car going and we peeled off. I don't remember much after that, but we both woke up the next afternoon, parked at a church in the middle of nowhere. Both of us had pounding headaches, and KG said after I went in the bathroom, she pulled him up and helped him into the bedroom, whispering how we were hers forever and that we never had to worry about anything ever again. He knew this was bad, but in his haze, he couldn't stand or yell for me. We drove him home silently. I didn't see KG for a while after that, and when I did, we never spoke of it again. Moral of the story? Just because you aren't alone doesn't mean you're safe. Just because you're a man doesn't mean you're safe. If you feel something is off, don't wait to get out of there. And please, don't drink anything you didn't see poured. Sorry if this story is a bit of a downer or if it's inappropriate, but this memory has never left my mind. It was awful and terrifying, but also surreal and almost feels like a dream. KG said that luckily I knocked at the perfect time, and she didn't get what she wanted out of him, and the knock brought him back to momentary awareness. Things could have been a lot worse, but I will never forget what happened in the apartment in the fields. This story happened when I was a junior in high school. I, female, was a friendly and curious person. 1 month into the fall semester, we got a new transfer student. He looked nervous. Seated behind me was Joe. I, of course, introduced myself to him, trying to ease the tension. I showed him what we have learned so far. I helped him look over his class schedule. We had 2 classes and lunch period together. Naturally, we got to know each other and became friends. He's a quiet kid, but talked a lot around me. I assumed he was just comfortable with me. I made it clear that we're just friends, and he agreed. Then we started hanging out with my friends. Now, fast forward to spring break, I told Joe I'm going out of town with my family. He seemed disappointed that we can't spend the break together, but he was understanding. I ran into Joe in a restaurant. I didn't tell him where I was going, so I thought, wow, what a coincidence. He said he was visiting a family in this same town. Now, in senior year, Joe and I hung out at least once a week, then turned into 2, then into 3. I noticed we were spending too much time together, and I wanted to make time for my other friends too. That's when things started to change. I ran into Joe, or should I say I saw him in the corner of my eye when I spent time with someone else or by myself. He became very obsessive and clingy. The first 2 to 3 times I didn't think much of it. It all became clear when I questioned him and he accidentally said he followed me because he wants to make sure I'm safe. I felt betrayed and creeped out. He apologized and asked for forgiveness, and I told him I didn't want to be friends anymore. He got really mad and left. He didn't come to school for the next 3 days. My friends told me he harassed them for snitching on him. He came back to school and we pretended that we didn't know each other. On my walk home, I hear Joe calling my name in a low and unfamiliar tone, but he is nowhere to be seen. I didn't know why, but my gut told me to run as fast as I could. I kept running until I got home. I made sure every door and window was locked. I'm convinced I was being paranoid at this point. Then my phone screen lights up. Joe repeatedly called me. Then I hear Joe calling my name again. He's in front of my house now, banging on the door. I called my dad and told him what happened. I pleaded with Joe to stop banging on the door. Everything went completely silent after 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The last word I heard from him, "You will always be my best friend." This issue was brought up to the school and Joe never showed up again. Now it's been 4 years. Just a few days ago, I got friend requests on 2 of my social media. It was Joe. I blocked him and changed all my social media names to something else. I don't live in the same town now, nor in the same country. I'm now on the other side of the world, but I can't help feel like a scared 18-year-old me again. I'm not the friendly person I once was. I've become very cautious around other people. Ever since I was 14 years old, I've been scared of lightning. It all started when I was out on a soccer field during a thunderstorm and lightning struck the fence, just over 100 feet away from me. The sound was absolutely deafening and I can still remember the awful sensation of the sound vibrating through my whole body. But this wouldn't be my only incident involving a lightning strike that I came close to. The next time it wouldn't only scare me, it would also be my salvation. When I turned 20, I moved out from my parents who live in the capital of my country, to a small community in the south, and I have no intention of moving back. Sure, a girl that grew up in the city is used to having the endless variation of restaurants, bars, and stores that never close, and a city that never sleeps. But I like it here. Despite the low population of the community and something of a sleepy town stamp on it, it is charming with its colorful wooden houses, the seaside campus, and the smell of butter from the old butter factory as an eternal reminder of where you are. I can practically go out whenever I want, wherever I want, and meet a total of 10 people. The neighborhood cats, and if I'm lucky, a cute but lost hedgehog. There is one more reason why I appreciate living in a small town. It is how incredibly safe I feel here. In the city, you can barely be outside alone as a woman after 10 p.m. without feeling such discomfort that you feel compelled to check behind you once or twice every minute. All such discomfort, however, doesn't only happen after said time or during the darkest hours of the day. It can happen at any time, but that is something you learn, something I had to learn. I was 17 and it was the summer holidays. I was spending most of it at my then boyfriend's house, and he lived with his family about 20 minutes outside of the city. I lived with my parents at the time in the city center, just along the green subway line, so if I wanted to get back home, I had to take the commuter train to the central station, walk across it, switch to the green subway line, and ride a few minutes on there to get to my station. I was then on one of my rebellious periods and had bleached my hair a month before. I loved it at first, but after a while my roots started to show and I realized my mistake. My angel of a mother had been tired of my fuss over it and booked me at a hairdresser so that I could go back to my natural deep brown hair color. The day for my appointment at the hairdresser came, and I was, as usual, at my boyfriend's, but I needed something from my parents' apartment first, so I put on my headphones and jumped on the commuter train. I switched as usual to the green line and sat near one of the doors that I knew would line up perfectly to where I would get off. I like to crowd watch when I travel. Not to stare people out or anything like that, but just to look at people and think about where they are going, what they do for work, or maybe make up a story about them. It's kind of a game I often find myself playing on the subway or a commuter train. I played the game that day. I looked around at people, and when there was one station left until my stop, my eyes stuck to a man who was sitting a few feet in front of me. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-30s. His hair was dark and scruffy, and he was wearing dark clothes and big boots. He sat with his elbows leaning against his knees, crouching slightly down towards the subway floor. Today, I don't remember what my analysis or fictional story of him was, but I know I saw him. The woman in the speaker shouted out my destination, and I stood up and went to the doors and stepped off. When I got out of the doors of the station, I saw that it had started to rain, so I pulled my big hood over the headphones and started to quickly walk up to the apartment, which was only a few hundred feet from the station. The apartment is an old building with a large wooden door facing the street. The door has a glass pane that runs along the entire door, and when you enter, the staircase is entirely in marble with an old wooden elevator with an iron lattice door that you have to close manually. When I got to the door, I put in the entry code and pushed up the door. When the door was swung aside, something was reflected in the glass. I turned around and saw the man from the subway standing behind me. At first, I was a little shocked that he was so close to me, but I assumed he was one of my neighbors or a neighbor's friend. I also assumed that he stood so close to me because it rained and he didn't want to get wet, so I said hello and pressed up the door an extra time with my hip while I took off my headphones. He did not answer. I went to the lift and pressed the button, but I heard that I didn't start, so I assumed that the neighbors had opened the lattice door to park the elevator at their floor while they locked their door. I turned around and saw the man standing behind me, shaking. It was not a typical type of shaking that's common if you have a fever or a cold, but more like a spastic twitching. He stood there jerking, with his head and his back as curved as he had on the subway. But this time his eyes were not on the floor, they were on me. He opened his mouth to talk, but only incoherent sounds came out, while the shaking and jerking became more frantic. "What's your name?" he said at last. I remember my parents' words of wisdom to never tell your name to a stranger, especially one whom you feel threatened by. I wanted to tell him to go, but I felt like I was frozen and provoking him might make the situation worse. I replied with a false name. He then asked, "Do you live here?" I lied and answered that I don't, that I'm just here to see a friend. I remember thinking I was smart. Now he didn't know my name or where I lived, I thought. But it was now that he started moving closer to me. I started backing up. He must have seen the fear in my eyes, but he continued, scuffing towards me. I heard the elevator engine start ticking and that it was on its way down. He told me he has been following me on the train, that he saw me there and that he just had to follow me. It was now that he lifted his head from his previous position showing how tall he really was, and the shaking stopped. He spoke again. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he said. If I thought I was frozen before, that was an understatement. I was now pressed against the elevator door, and he was so close that I could feel his scent. Some may think that these words still have to be somewhat flattering, but the way he said it sounded like a death sentence, like something bad for me. It was about when I heard the elevator stop on the first floor and somebody walked down the stairs to the courtyard door. That door is located on a small platform between the ground floor and the first floor stairs. You also know how you can recognize and distinguish your parents' steps from others? I did this with these steps that came down the stairs, and I heard they were my father's. I quickly thought that I would scream for him, but then I realized that the man would know that I first lied and that he might get angry and do something to my old father. That was when my father opened the door to the courtyard and the lightning struck the yard. The sound waves of the cracking lightning pressed themselves through the open door and made the whole marble stairwell scream. I screamed. The man screamed. I went to my usual position regarding thunder and lightning, the fetal position on the floor. He, on the other hand, jumped backwards and started running out while he shouted that we'll be seeing each other again soon. I barely realized what had happened. I went crying up in the elevator and into the apartment, where I told everything to my mom and dad when he came up from the courtyard. We reported the incident to the police, and I went and dyed my hair, which made me feel a little safer as my appearance changed quite drastically. I was still a little scared after the incident, but also confused. I just kept thinking about what he was saying when he ran out. We will be seeing each other again soon. I knew at least that I absolutely did not want to see him again. However, I didn't get what I wanted. About a month passed, and I had practically forgotten about the situation. I was on my way to the central station to meet up with my boyfriend, who was on the commuter train on his way to me. I stood and waited for him in the hallway between the commuter trains and the subway. In that particular hallway, a lot of people are walking, either to the trains or from the trains. Very few people are standing still in it. As I said, I stood there, looking down the hallway from time to time, trying to see if my boyfriend had come yet. When I saw somebody else standing still, there was someone standing on the other side of the crowd, and although everyone else goes in different directions and creates a kind of blurred effect on him, see who it is. I freeze just like before. He stares at me, not like our first meeting, but as if he is trying to make up his mind if I am who he thinks I am, behind the dark hair. Then my boyfriend comes from the crowd and hugs me, and I had to look away from the man a few seconds to hug him back. I leaned my head against his shoulder and looked over it to see if the man was still there, but he was gone. I haven't seen him since. Has he seen me, though? This is a story that's really been bothering me lately for absolutely no reason whatsoever. A few months back, I just had this dream that brought back this memory I tried to suppress growing up, but as of recently, it's been weighing on my mind. Growing up in 2005 on the edge of the suburbs, there was a large grove of trees and hills by some railroad tracks that led to a big forest about half a mile from my house. When I was 9 years old, I and my neighborhood friends would ride our bikes to the railroad tracks and walk to the forest to go explore the random pieces of furniture and junk in this peculiar forest. We'd play card games, do homework, and hang with friends out there for about an hour or two, but never sat out there too long. There were small abandoned houses here and there in this forest that we stayed away from, as one neighborhood friend, Michael, told me there was a homeless man who lived in one of them, and if you saw him, to run. So right off the bat, after hearing this, going near this house in the woods was as scary as could be. One chilly November afternoon after school, I came home and dropped off my backpack at my house and immediately went to the woods. My bike was broken, so I walked. Michael had told me at school that day to meet him in this open area of the forest to play Pokemon with him. This was something we'd do frequently growing up, just to pass the time until our parents got home at 4 p.m., so it was nothing unusual. As I crossed the railroad tracks into the forest, I instantly felt a weird sensation, that feeling you feel when somebody is watching you. I looked all around and couldn't see anybody, so I thought I was just getting spooked. As the rather overcast day was very eerie anyway. Tracking through the autumn leaves scattered across this large wooded area, I came upon the big open area where I was supposed to meet Michael. Near the area where we normally met was his notebook, open. On the page was written, "Hey, I had to go back home and grab some batteries for my Game Boy. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon. Michael." I waited. Being alone, especially feeling like somebody was watching me, made this particular moment very uncomfortable. However, I convinced myself I was just being a wuss and decided to wait for him. I sat down and began playing my Game Boy. But it wasn't too long until that sensation of being watched grew into utter paranoia. I kept frantically looking up from my Game Boy and checking my watch to see how long I'd been waiting. I'd been sitting there for 30 minutes. It was beginning to get dark. Then I heard some leaves crunch. I looked in the direction of the sound and briefly saw a dark hooded figure peeking from behind a few trees and hiding back behind them. My skin crawled and I immediately jumped up from where I was sitting and froze in my tracks, staring. I screamed, "Hello," to see if anybody was there. I was quickly reminded I wasn't alone when I saw this tall, dirty-looking hooded man peek back around from the trees. He called back, "Hey, buddy." I picked up Michael's notebook and ran for my life. I ran so fast I barely had time to look behind me. However, I heard leaves crunching not too far behind me. It was the man running after me. He was screaming for me to come back and, "I just want to talk to you. I'm sorry." I began crying as I was running, thinking this was exactly how those missing kids disappear. I ran and ran and ran until I literally tripped over the railroad tracks and cut up my knees. Michael was just getting to the railroad tracks. He saw me, dirty and bloody and crying hysterically, and I screamed at him to run. Without a question, we ran all the way home. The hooded man was nowhere to be seen once we left the railroad tracks. I last saw him standing in the woods, defeated that he couldn't catch me or something. I don't know. I told Michael everything and we never went back to those woods ever again. Years later, in 2016, they bulldozed the woods and built a neighborhood there. We later found out from fellow neighborhood friends who were in the area that the same thing happened to them growing up. To this day, this is probably one of my scariest stories growing up.